Good morning. We are live in Facebook right now, and I'm here. This is Tamara Fleming, author of Upswing 80 Mindful Practices to Shift Your Life from Blues to Bliss. And I'm here with Jim Young. Jim, take it away.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Namaste. I'm the author of Aware in the World of Sleep, which will inform you about certain aspects of our conversation today, particularly about forgiveness. But here we are talking about a what could be a fairly complicated topic, but I know before we're through, you're either going to be completely confused or completely aware. So let's go from here.
Let's hope for enlightenment here for everyone, because
Absolutely.
right now I woke up this morning and I could just, I'm so sensitive to energy. I could feel Irma and the fires and the smoke and the just the chaos that's going on our planet.
Yeah.
And then I had a conversation with a good spiritual friend of mine, and we just talked about how we've been built for this time on the planet, how we've really been built to hold the energy, to hold the space, to hold the love, and do all those things, and try to help people come through stages of what they may need to come through, to live a more peaceful, calm life. So I'm really excited to talk about this topic, forgiving self-sabotage, because I think it's something that people face potentially every day. And I know that you, Jim, are going to have a lot to say about this. We have not rehearsed this call. It is going to be raw and real. And I'm just delighted that you're here and that you and I are talking about this, because I think it'll be a huge value to everyone.
Well, you likewise. I'm glad you pointed out that we don't rehearse these things. I think we tap into each other's heart energy very well and just open up to what we hear is to be said and say it. So I think that's a healthy thing, and it encourages other people to listen as well, not always to have a prepared answer, but to really listen to another person and to let that inform where we're agreeing or not agreeing, or whether it even matters whether we agree. It's an important ingredient, I think, about our topic, interestingly. Tamara asked me what I thought of forgiveness was, and I said, we'll find out. I didn't want to give her anything up front because I'm not sure what I'm going to say about it. It'll depend on how the conversation goes. I'm just wondering if our listeners know what self-sabotage is. Tamara, I think a lot of us go through life really unaware of why we're behaving the way we are in a particular circumstance. We feel anger, we feel upset, we feel loving, we feel whatever, but we don't ever look behind it to see what it is that we're about in all of that. So maybe we should take a few minutes to talk about what the self-sabotage kind of thing is.
Yeah, I like that idea. I was thinking about it this morning also, and that what causes us to sabotage our beings, what causes us to sabotage? And the word that came into my head was fear. And fear being the thing of, we're afraid to look bad, we're afraid that something will go wrong or will hurt someone or something like that. It's like we even self-sabotage ourselves in saying the truth, which is really nuts, because if the truth is the truth, and I'm talking about universal truth versus someone's grand opinion, that we then even can sabotage that because we are afraid that people will think something of us rather than just being honest and being truthful. And I think there's, a lot of power in that. So I think fear is the thing that drives a lot of self-sabotage.
Well, yes, I agree 100% with that. And I would say that awareness of that fear is what forgives it. If we're not aware, we will continue, or we'll do the head game kind of thing on it. I won't use a vulgar term with that, but the head game where we try to talk ourselves out of it. For example, I think that we learn a lot about how to interface with the world out of storytelling. One of the most predominant storytelling episodes that I hear from people all the time is, I'm not good enough.
Yeah.
Or I'll never match where my parents had expectations of me. Or I'll never be able to be the husband or wife that my partner wants me to be. Those are stories that we tell ourselves over and over and over again. And when we wear those as our glasses, if you will, as our lenses to look at life through, it is a perpetual kind of self-sabotaging we do every day, and how we deal with everybody around us, but more importantly, how we deal with our real self. To me, self-sabotage is not living true to ourselves, and that leaves most everything we do not living true to ourselves, because we don't really know how to do that. How many of us have even explored the opportunity to say, what am I really about? Not who am I, because that turns out to be Jim, the radio participant, Jim, the author, Jim, the brother, Jim, the father, Jim, the uncle.
Mm-hmm.
No, those are roles we play. But what we are, the essence of being, this wide open, vast realm of a loving being. When
Yeah.
we behave from there, it's like somebody said, why do you tell jokes during serious talks that you give? And I say, because I'm fun loving. And they say, well, you really shouldn't tell those because it gets confusing. I said, and I started taking that seriously. Then I thought, baloney. I'm not going to stop being fun loving. If it's something, a story fits that lightens something, it tells us we don't have to take this all so damn seriously.
Yeah.
Particularly ourselves so seriously, right?
Yep.
That is a self-sabotage when we take ourselves too seriously. You naturally are open and full of joy and have good sense of humor. You even make me think that I have a decent sense of humor when you laugh at what I say sometimes. So it's about being true to ourselves when we're not, and that, as I say, that leaves a lot of room for us to self-sabotage. So that's part of what self-sabotaging means to me.
So what I hear you saying, which I think is so key, and so much of what we talk about on in our chats is complex, but also extraordinarily simple.
Oh, yeah.
What you're talking about is having one awareness of what you're doing, knowing it. And I want to add on to that. I think awareness is most helpful when you can feel it in the body. When you feel a negative emotion, you can actually identify, I don't feel good. When you feel a positive emotion, you know what that feels like. So if the positive, the joyful, delightful, free emotions are the places that are our natural state of being, then we can use that as a gauge of, I am here having a negative experience and learning something, and I can move myself back over. I know in my consciousness program, my 7-year program that I was in so diligently, we had to be literally on top of that decision point all day long, every moment of every day. And my teacher used to say, he'd come around and he'd be like, I'm leaving. I don't want to be around that emotion, because that is an emotion that you're choosing in your ego state mind to be in a story, in a negative emotion. And so, then it would be like, oh, crud, okay, so let me just bring myself back. And it was literally that simple practice of that awareness and bringing myself, choosing to be in a different state and emotion, which I have the power to do to raise my vibration. It's really not complex. It's just, it takes muscle to decide to do it.
An author friend of mine by the name of Tamara Fleming wrote a wonderful book, and on page 112 of that book, Tamara, I think you deal with looking at those feelings, those emotions, and setting them free, if you will, seeing that you are feeling, really acknowledging the feelings, and then going into that and let that open up, trying it until you don't feel that strongly anymore, and then you're pretty much free. Some people would call that forgiveness. My own view is if we stay aware, forgiveness is rendered unnecessary. But we're human beings. We're in consciousness all the time. Mm-hmm. That to me is the key, to become aware of what consciousness we're in.
Can you, that right there, what you just said is so key right now on our planet, because being aware of the consciousness that we are in, because people who have, let's just call them monks, who have sat out, holding the energy in a certain way. And then there's the everyday person who has to go to work and feed their babies and buy groceries and do all of that, and there's this broad spectrum in between. But when you say being aware and being conscious, you know, does it feel to you like we're pulling the cart, or are we in the cart, or are we pushing are we pushing uphill? What are we doing?
Well, I think those all fit in the ego consciousness, all three of those. See, for me, there is no cart. It's like people say, think outside of the box. I say, there is no box. The minute you put parameters on it, in one sense, then you're in ego. It's I can, I can't, I must, I mustn't. The other part of it is that through the natural course of events, we tend to give our lives away. We tend to be pleasers. We fail to set up healthy boundaries with friends and with relationships in our businesses, with our partners, and we end up going too far. It comes out to me, it comes out of the whole feeling again that I'm not good enough. I
Yeah.
mean, if I were good enough, why wouldn't I be living the life, of prosperity? Fact of the matter is, you don't live in your prosperity because you're going down the wrong road. Maybe even doing something that really doesn't call you, but doing something that somebody else told you you should do. To me, that's self-sabotage again.
Oh
Take,
gosh, that's a good one.
oh,
Yeah,
yeah,
living
yeah,
somebody else's life.
oh
Mhm.
yeah, sure. And you're never happy with it. You wonder, why can't I be successful? Well, because you're self-sabotaging all the time. You're not living true to yourself. It's like the young fellow, for example, who wants to be an artist or wants to be a musician. And you know that by watching him as a child constantly. His heart is filled with joy when he does either of those two things. Let's say a musician. He tinkers with drums. He tinkers with little keyboards. He ends up, you hear him sing even in the bathtub, and you say, holy smokes, this young person is really talented. And when they get older, they say, I think I want to be a musician. And somebody in the family or a friend says, oh, you can't earn a living that way. And it
Mhm.
stops. And so what do? They end up being a music teacher
Mhm.
or selling instruments in a store, but they don't be a musician.
Mhm.
Well, that's self-sabotage again. And it's based primarily by the views of others that we take on as our own.
Yeah, societal conditioning, people who we care about, and doing all that. And I know, one of the things that you might have to do is break away from your societal structure and family in order to be able to break free of some of those thoughts. It's not that you're breaking free of the people, it's the thoughts and the patterns that you might need to break away from. And I've gone through that myself. And it's a scary job, because you're really, when you come out of your own family structure, your societal structure, you're on your own.
Oh, yeah.
So when you're on your own, you have to make your own decisions about who am I going to be and what do I believe in. And wait a minute, that thought that I had doesn't fit my heart. It doesn't fit, and it doesn't feel good.
Yeah.
And I had to say no to some things that my whole life, over 50 years of my life, was built around that structure, which is I believed that thing, or I believed certain things, or I believed certain people. And it was difficult to break free of that, but it was a self-sabotage, because if you're so right, if we are unlimited potential human beings, if we have unlimited potential in us, then that is a form of putting a coat or a hat or the dome of doom over yourself
Mhm.
by not being who you truly are.
Well, and when you said so perfectly, I think, when you found out what those things were, oh my gosh, I was doing this and I need to do that, or this, my feeling isn't matching what I really want to be in this particular moment. That to me is forgiveness.
Yeah.
It just naturally happens. You take this, all of a sudden you're able to take this breath of freedom. You don't feel tense. You don't feel uptight. You don't feel like, how am I going to get out of this? But your whole entity relaxes around it. It's sort of like in the Course in Miracles, I've had this debate with some friends of mine who taught it for 25 years. And they talk about forgiveness and that you've got to forgive yourself. And in an ego conscious world, I think that's absolutely true. Because if you don't forgive yourself, then you end up drinking Clorox and thinking it's going to poison the person you want revenge against. I mean, it just doesn't work that way. But in a real sense, when you get a different perception of something, oh, and you said it beautifully, this isn't the way I want to be in this situation. I'm not being true to myself in this situation. Once you come to that point, to me, that is forgiveness. And it is the miracle because you're able now to see yourself in a different light and your relationships with the whole world begin to shift because you see it more frequently and more frequently until you're just, oh man, I can be myself, not worry about it anymore.
Yes. Now there's some peace, right? I
Yeah,
can be myself and not worry about it anymore.
yeah.
Oh, how do you know? How do you know when that happens? How do you know when you have let go of what other people think and have become you're the core center of your world? How do
Well,
you know
for me it's a feeling of inner peace that has no definition. It just is. It's a sense of why did I ever worry about that? You know, you worry and worry and worry and worry, and something comes to pass that has nothing to do with anything you worried about. That says, boy, that was dumb. Why did I worry about that? It was perfect from the beginning. It's that feeling of taking the burden off your shoulders. Well, I'm going to use this story. I paused for a moment because I was checking everything as whether I should or not. I want to tell this quick story. I have a friend of mine who was married 7 times. And matter of fact, he's with his 8th wife. And I remember years ago when I was visiting family in Greece, my father was a Greek immigrant, visiting family there. And I was sitting with my cousin Tassos in Athens, and we took his mother out to dinner and tucked her in. We were sitting out there having a nightcap on his veranda overlooking the city of Athens, the Acropolis in the distance and so on under light. And he was talking to me about particular things that were troubling to him. I said, you know, I'm really feeling pretty good about life right now. I said, I don't have anything like that going, but I said, you know, my brother just had, oh no, my brother, my friend just had his 6th divorce. And he said, your friend just had his 6th divorce? I said, yes. And he took a sip of his drink and looked off into the night sky and he said, isn't that wonderful? And I said, didn't you just hear me? And he says, yes, I heard you. Isn't it wonderful that 6 different women could have loved him enough to marry him? Well, when I got home, I landed in Atlanta first, and I went to then phone booth. I don't have a cell phone even now, but I certainly didn't have one then. And I went to a phone and I called this friend of mine. And I said, Jack, I've got a story I want to tell you. And I told him that story, and there was absolute silence on the other end. I said, Dick, did you hear me? Nothing. Dick, are you there? Hello? I'm here. Give me a minute. And I waited. It seemed like hours. It probably was 30 seconds. And he got back on the phone. He said, I'm sorry to hold you up. He said, but I cannot tell you what a relief that was to hear that, because I have carried guilt with every one of those divorces my entire life.
Oh, wow.
And when you told me that story, and I'm feeling goosebumps now, he said, it just fell off of me like an anvil off my shoulders. Then he began to explain all the whys. I said, Dick, you don't need to explain the whys. Are you relieved? He said, I can't tell you how relieved I am. Now that's a long story, but it goes to tell you what happens when we can let go of this self-deceit. I'm guilty, the gift that never stops giving, right? I mean, and people will assure it, oh, you got a divorce, what's wrong, blah, 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 you know? Mm-hmm. So, but anyhow.
Well, that is a beautiful story about forgiveness and letting yourself off the hook. You know, it's such a, when we keep ourselves on the hook, it's such an energetically destructive energy. You know, it's debilitating. I know in my life, I had a business that failed and I had investors, and I spent probably another decade trying to make that right. And it really almost took my life in a way, my life force for sure. But I just would not let myself off the hook for it. Mm-hmm. And I kept saying, I know better. I can learn the lesson and I can move forward. But I still, hung on to the fact that I had created a failure in my life. So failure is something that I think we keep ourselves on the hook for horribly. And it's a lesson, right?
Well,
Go ahead.
to me, I like to use the word gift rather than lesson even.
Mhm.
I think everything that happens in life is a gift one way or another. It just depends on how you look at it. To me, the real answer is look where it got you now. We're sitting together having a fun conversation for 20 minutes or so, having a great time, connecting on a level that's real, authentic. And if you had done that business, I would have never met you. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm part of it. It just means we're in a different place, enjoying life in a different way. So for me, that was a gift.
Yes, I get it. And for me also, I like the way you rephrase that. It has been a gift because it shapes how I do everything now,
Yeah.
so that I don't return to that self-sabotage or to that energy where I would be beating myself up for not doing something right. That's a big one.
Yeah.
Well, we are at about 20 plus minutes here, and I wanted to wrap this up with what would be your final words about forgiving self-sabotage? Simple words that someone can take away and that will totally change their life forever.
Oh my gosh. You talk about a load. Oh my gosh. I like to use the word forgiving as two words. Life is for giving up the ideas that hold yourself from being who you really are. For giving up. Uh, Now that's a little trite, maybe a little bit silly, but it works for me.
Yeah.
All of the stuff that keeps you in a place where you're not, that is with what you are not, is for giving up. And if we learn to take, for example, the ego consciousness as a gift, all the things about ego, I'm not good enough, I've got to do what she says or what he says. If we take those as gifts, saying, oh, guess where I am? Back there again. Okay, let me just back up a little bit here and see how I want to handle that. And you go back to this space, the heart space, and live from there. The rest is for giving up. That's all I got to say. I
Beautiful.
might have more, but we don't have time.
I know. Well, this is a big topic. We'll probably talk about it again.
Yeah. Oh, well, it'll weave in and out of everything because we do act out of ego consciousness and that. And I think that we're getting to know each other well enough where you can say, hey, Jim, EC, ego consciousness a little bit. Let's back up and take that a different way. And I'll say thank you for that gift as you are.
Yes, we need each other to help each other move along the trail. Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again for your delightful beingness with me today. And I hope that the listeners are still hanging in there and that we've learned a lot about forgiving self-sabotage and setting the heart free, because that is definitely our birthright.
Absolutely. Namaste, everyone. I love you.
Namaste and bye for now.
Bye.